Good morning. Welcome to the perks and pitfalls of return to office. I'm Sam from Mobility Ways, and I'm delighted that you could join us today. I'm really pleased to be joined by Katherine Harvey. Katherine is a workplace consultant with over 20 years' experience helping organisations design workplaces that really work for people, performance, and purpose. She advises senior estates, facilities, and business leaders on workplace strategy, technology, and data-led insight. And she's a regular international speaker as well, known for turning complex workplace challenges into practical, evidence-based outcomes. I think I'm really interested today because return to office has been one of the defining workplace debates ever since the pandemic. Organisations have taken very different approaches, actually, from strict mandates to highly flexible hybrids, and the results have been quite mixed. So there's clearly no one size fits all answer. So today I'm keen to explore what's actually working, where leaders are going wrong, and how to balance organisational priorities with employee expectations. So Catherine is going to share some real world examples, practical insight and lessons that you can apply immediately. Please do add your questions into the chat as we go, and it'd be really helpful if you could also say either what company you're from or the type of organisation. So Catherine, over to you.
Thanks so much, Sam. So welcome to this webinar discussing the perks and pitfalls of the return to office. Thank you to Mobility Ways for asking me to speak as part of their series. I'm going to start off with a question. If hybrid is the new normal, why is there still so much debate about days in the office? So this morning I'll be sharing with you some tensions I'm seeing playing out in the workplace at the moment, as well as some ways to tackle the issues that we see our clients struggling with. So I'm also having a Chris Whitty moment, and I'm going to be saying next slide quite a lot. So next slide, please. So why are we still talking about return to office years after the phrase was first coined? Well, it's because the implications of decisions about when people should come into the office are having real world consequences right now. Decisions about return to office are showing up in three key places: talent, real estate, and reputation. Hybrid working is no longer an experiment, but a reality that most businesses have accepted, except for a few notable exceptions that we'll be coming to later. Now, organisations are refining their office footprints accordingly, and while overall space requirements may be reducing, expectations of what offices should deliver are rising. Next slide. According to the latest 2026 Okta Office Space Report, the market has split. Average space is struggling, but best-in-class space is thriving, and demand is now concentrated around a limited pool of very high-quality buildings. At Rethink, we've been observing a flight to quality for some time now, and the best-in-class new smart buildings, upgraded and refurbished buildings are in very much high demand by premium occupiers. For them, it's all about finding a building that can provide compelling employee experience and that also aligns with their ESG goals and commitments. So who's doing what and what are the implications? Next slide. According to a recent report from Hubstar, which looked at data from 27,000 workspaces in 13 countries right up to December last year, globally, peak occupancy is on Tuesdays at 59%. You can see that on the right side of the graph. In London, we're actually at 75% on Tuesdays, which is very high, with Wednesdays and Thursdays trailing behind. Now, there was a point when some FM I spoke to were removing Fridays and sometimes even Mondays from their occupancy calculations altogether, as the drop-off was so severe it skewed their figures too much. But now Mondays are 55%, so it's not far off the global peak, and Fridays are still struggling, I'm afraid, at 25%. So the problem is that as a company, you're paying for a busy 3 days, with the majority, 4 out of 7, the remaining days of the week, still being underutilised. So this makes offices the most expensive and most underused assets on the balance sheet. Leaders are giving a variety of reasons for their return to office mandates, from collaboration, learning and mentoring, to creativity and employee engagement. But it's the real reason that they want to see their very expensive office space being used. Because if offices are underused or even optional, real estate becomes a cost centre rather than a strategic asset. And that's uncomfortable for boards. Next slide. So we're seeing more and more RTO mandates, but what are the implications of that? I've picked 3 examples from completely different industries to show you how some of this has played out. So in case you didn't see, I know Jim Ratcliffe's been in the news more for other things recently, but in 2024, Manchester United made headlines when they ordered everyone back to the office after he controversially used email traffic as a metric for productivity and said he noticed a 20% decrease on Fridays. When there was a pushback about trust and autonomy, he argued, if you don't like it, please seek alternative employment, or words to that effect. So more importantly, the space wasn't ready. They ended up having to hire an agency to convert hospitality areas at the stadium into makeshift office spaces. And ultimately, it cost the club money and reputational damage. So in short, mandates without preparation create operational chaos. Next slide. Pre-COVID, HSBC was planning to downsize its huge London footprint by 50% with a move from HSBC Tower in Canary Wharf to a smaller headquarters in the city. The building project was nicknamed the GOAT, greatest of all time, and the focus was on quality, technology, and employee experience. I helped working on that project, and they're really doing some amazing stuff there. But in 2025, the bank set a new 60% in-office mandate and quickly realised the new HQ was going to be too small, leading to emergency leasing of extra space back in Canary Wharf to accommodate staff. And that was costly and embarrassing. Next slide. Meanwhile, at the advertising agency WPP, their chief exec issued a statement in 2025 saying that most of us will work 4 days a week from April. It led to a huge staff backlash described by agency employees as having gone down like a cup of cold sick. There was a petition from 15,000 of its employees and an 8% drop in share price. And maybe not surprisingly, the CEO, Mark Reed, has recently resigned. So real world ramifications to getting this wrong. Next slide. So where are the tensions here? There's a tension between organisations and individuals. There's friction around return to office, and it's baked into the system, and it's not caused by people being awkward, which is the narrative sometimes. So on the one side, companies talk about collaboration, culture, and leadership control. And on the other side, individuals highlight issues with focus, commuting time, and cost. And women and parents are the most reluctant to be in the office 5 days a week. So there is the potential for an impact on gender and diversity that also needs to be considered. So from the organisation pool slide, we have, next slide, culture and cohesion I'm going to talk about first. Workplace culture does suffer when people work remotely. Research from the Institute for Fiscal Studies highlights concerns that younger workers and new joiners experience weaker integration and slower wage progression when they're fully remote. And this makes sense. As a manager, it's very easy, human nature even, to have proximity bias. And that's where you connect more with the colleagues that you see, talk to, and work with in person. There's been some research from Leeds University that found that students transitioning into hybrid workplaces really struggled to understand the intricacies of workplace culture. They reported difficulties in working out how their day-to-day work fitted in with the rest of the company. And without the physical cues of the workspace, they couldn't work out who were in positions of seniority or how to talk to them. And from my own research, I also know that this leads to a higher attrition after the graduate period because those new recruits don't feel as though they've connected. Another big pull from an organisational perspective is knowledge transfer and mentoring. So learning by osmosis, picking up snippets of information from colleagues that could shape your work, overhearing senior conversations are all really difficult when you're not physically around experienced colleagues. Law firms argue that physical presence is vital for mentoring and professional development. Again, I did a study a couple of years ago where I spoke to senior lawyers, partners, juniors and trainees at a number of key law firms. And it became apparent that the juniors and trainees were happy with the work-life balance. In fact, they enjoyed their time at home, balanced with the buzz that they spent in the office. However, there was a big difference. The senior lawyers who've been in the business for years and have seen many graduates passing through could see that the juniors were not as advanced as they should be and were lagging behind on knowledge and capability. So unless companies change the way they mentor and teach, remote and hybrid workers are always going to lose out. Now, one element often cited by business leaders is a greater need for collaboration and innovation. So I remember coming into the office for a brainstorming session when lockdown eased for the first time and finding the results of in-person collaboration almost magical. It was so good to be in person with people. But now there's been time to look back over those periods in an academic way. The results are pretty conclusive. In a study led by economists from the University of Essex and the University of Chicago, showed that when everyone was working from home, the quantity of ideas was the same, but the quality suffered. And then in a hybrid situation, particularly where there was poor coordination of in-office time, The quantity of ideas was also reduced. So badly organized hybrid working is actually the worst for innovation. So what are companies doing about this? PwC, amongst many other companies, have moved to a more structured hybrid approach, arguing that in-person time supports collaboration and innovation, particularly for complex client work. Staff and partners are required to be in the office or at client sites for at least 60% of their working time. They also track their office attendance alongside recording chargeable hours. And they will consider disciplinary procedures if staff aren't keeping their side of the bargain. And we're definitely seeing disciplinary actions coming in for people who are not going into the office as much as a company one. So the takeaway is that days need to be aligned and considered to get the most out of collaboration and create innovation. And finally, on this point, utilization and ROI on real estate, which is what we were talking about earlier. Boards are quite rightly asking, if we're paying for prime office space, why is it half full? Going back to that recent Hubstar occupancy report, London has now reached 75% occupancy on Tuesdays compared to their global level of 59%, but Mondays and Fridays are still pretty dismal. So anchor days and mandates are having an impact, but the companies need to ask themselves what they are asking their employees to come in for. If it's only to justify the expense of the office, then that won't hold much sway. However, if they can articulate the requirements for learning, collaboration, and culture, then the argument is much more compelling. So how can we understand and mitigate the individual pushback, the alternative? Next slide, please. So commuting cost is a big one. So if we start with the fact that commuting time in London is much higher and more expensive than the national average, for those who started working during lockdown, so recent graduates, the added time and cost feels like an extra burden, especially on top of cost of living increases. Individual trips are more expensive, so the only way to curb the overall cost is to keep the frequency down. And the time saved commuting is often the time you need to finish off some work. So employers can help by living by the mantra that if we ask you to travel, it will be purposeful. Anchor days ensure the right teams are together on the right days, and clustering meetings into collaboration days avoids fragmented travel, which is easier said than done from my experience, but it's still worth a try. And offering travel support such as ticket loans, as well as staggered start times to help with off-peak ticket pricing can really make a difference. So the takeaway here is if you're commuting, let's make it purposeful. So caring responsibilities and constraints is a tricky one, as most people are contracted for specific hours in their place of work. There is new legislation in place to support recognised carers, but there will always be those whose childcare arrangements have fallen through. And don't get me started on dogs, because that was another big thing coming out of lockdown, how many people had to care for their dogs. But in an LSE study in 2025 with data from the Institute for Employment Research, it showed that companies with family-friendly policies and those providing childcare see a significant impact on retention, and those firms attract more female talent, particularly in high-skilled occupations. So the takeaway with caring is that you need to build flexibility within the structure, but maybe consider providing childcare as well. The other one I have been hearing a lot, especially recently, is around sort of energy focus and mental health. So after months or years of working in quiet home environments, the return to a bustling open plan office has made ambient noise feel more jarring, stressful, and disruptive to concentration. And it's official, we're actually more sensitive to general office hubbub. Workers feel like they're less productive in a noisy office rather than at home. And interestingly, with emptier offices, the background white noise of people working and talking can be less. And actually that makes those occasional coughs and conversations even more jarring. So companies can do a lot to help here. There's white noise machines, and I've seen these used very well in a state-of-the-art building called the Edge in Amsterdam. Creating workspaces that align more with the required tasks is also good. And even introducing activity-based working, which has lots of different environments to suit different work. Companies are investing in better acoustics, and there's been a huge increase in noise-cancelling headphone use, which is great until that person is on a call and can't hear that they're shouting. But the big takeaway here is that when you're talking about noise, you need to design for cognitive diversity, and that's another big trend that we're seeing around neurodiversity. So the last one here is perceived fairness and autonomy. So this is where some of the mandates and expectations start to fall down. Companies need to explain the business rationale rather than just because leadership wants it approach. So if possible, involve employees in shaping the hybrid principles and apply expectations consistently across seniority levels. I did some research with professional services after lockdown, and there was a time when partners were enjoying being in their homes with their lovely home offices, and juniors were in without the supervision. I think that has changed now, and we're seeing that senior levels need to role model the behaviour they want to see in the office. So the takeaway is around fairness. You need to explain the why and role model it. So now we've got time for a poll. So I'm so keen to know here which best describes your current office usage. So please choose one of these options. So mostly empty except for anchor days. So whilst anchor days are great for getting teams together, they can impact the other days considerably and need to be aligned across the business. The communications firm MHP rotates their anchor days to include Mondays and Fridays. So every team has to come in on those days at some point over the year, which is quite clever. And if you're going for peaks and troughs, hard to predict, it feels like this could actually be most organisations. Unless you have a structured policy, it's a free-for-all with unpredictable occupancy levels. This kind of activity tends to cause the most complaints as people struggle to find space to work, or even worse, find it like a ghost town. So consistently busy but uneven by team. This is a lot of the insurance and financial services firms I've been working with. Some functions are in 100% and others are out on client sites with customers and are much more unpredictable. These environments need to flex to accommodate different peaks and troughs, and data is everything. Oh, we've got the votes in. Let me quickly cover the last one. So near capacity most days. So this is driven by the return to office mandates and often office culture expectations, also leading to some companies needing to size up. So good examples of near capacity are HSBC, as discussed before, and also MasterCard, who are having to increase their footprint in the city. So as predicted, peaks and troughs, hard to predict. It feels like it could be most organisations, and it is the highest one here. So I think the real thing here is that data is now essential. It's necessary to know not only who is coming in, how they're using the space, and unpredictability isn't flexibility, it's unmanaged behaviour. So I say using the data to really try and understand and maybe create some policies to help support how to flatten that curve and give a bit more predictability. Thank you for your input there. That's great. I'd be interested to see who the one person there who was at near capacity. Maybe you can let us know afterwards. So whatever pattern you're seeing, the question isn't how full the office is, it's whether it's performing, and then what you need for that is data. So probably all remember the days when companies were offering perks to employees to get them out of the inertia of working remotely. The incentives or bribes, whatever you want to call them, varied from free coffee to travel subsidies, puppy yoga to live music. So during that time, I had a conversation with the head of property at Vodafone about what the ultimate incentive would look like. And he surprised me by saying at Vodafone, they found free bacon sandwiches were actually the biggest attraction. I know from other clients that beer taps were a big draw. I know they have them in WeWork. And I even heard of a Friday Prosecco trolley being introduced to try and lure people in on Fridays. So I wanted to create an image with the ultimate perk. And on the next slide, I used AI. I was quite pleased that it refused to give me David Attenborough doing something beneath him. So I had to settle for a generic older man who may or may not be David Attenborough. And he's about to give a guest lecture and he's offering a free bacon sandwich and a glass of Prosecco. And who wouldn't go in for that? I mean, I certainly would. But joking aside, perks were about attraction. Now, presence is about meaning. The things that continue to work need to be sustainable and not gimmicky. Good food offerings, ironically, are very popular and do bring people together. I know, for example, that Nomura in the city, they offer subsidised food and they have a special chicken katsu Thursday, which their head of catering told me was under debate with the company about whether it was worth it. But they argued it was now their busiest day because people were really coming into the office to take advantage of that. And the incentives need to align with the fundamental question, is today worth the commute? So we're going to come back to that question, but first I wanted to share a couple of case studies with you. So next slide. I thought it would be useful to look at two different approaches to return to the office. I've worked with both JP Morgan and Standard Chartered, and they are, I think, almost opposite in the way they're approaching things. So this is the JP Morgan building, new building in Park Avenue in New York. And their CEO, Jamie Dimon, famously ordered the workforce back 5 days a week. Many employees signed a petition, but he didn't care. And I know some employees left because they didn't want to work like that, but their offices are now full. And in New York, the plan was to consolidate a number of separate locations into this magnificent new office on Park Avenue, which has the best technology, and they were aiming for an incredible employee experience. But then recently, I was in New York in January, I heard that they are having to lease additional space to accommodate all of their people. So the thing is, this is their vision and they're sticking with it, and there is a clarity and a consistency, and they are also very successful. So that is one approach. And then on the next slide, we have Standard Chartered Bank. So this is their Singapore office, and I work with their global real estate team based from there on the change management associated with a very radical real estate approach, which was half the space, twice the experience. It was hybrid by design, aimed at supporting their very diverse workforce while downsizing their real estate footprint. Their focus too was about improving the employee experience when you're in the office, but the expectation was that you would do between 40 and 60% of your work at home and only use the office for collaboration meetings and workshops, etc. It has been incredibly popular with their staff. They have a very high diversity rate within their workforce, and it's gone down really well. And they've said that they would never backtrack on that because it's been so popular. So the answer here, really, the takeaway is there's no single right answer. What matters is alignment between your strategy, your space, and behavior. Clarity beats compromise, and whether strict or flexible, coherence wins. So next slide. So I want to come back to the question, is today worth a commute? At Rethink, we are agnostic about the number of days people should or shouldn't be in the office. It really depends on the industry, the company, the role. In fact, we need to shift the dialogue from how many days to what experience are we trying to achieve. At Rethink, we have a data-first approach, blending psychological insight with analysis to understand how people really work, and then using that data to cut through assumptions and create workplaces that support people to perform at their best. Our data lab service solves unpredictability and utilization myths. It turns complex workplace building and operational data into clear insights that leaders can actually use. We have a fascinating live project where the data element of the strategy is already providing a Magic Circle law firm with information about how their new building is being used, and they've only been there a few weeks. It's fascinating. Our data-led workplace strategy aligns space with real behavior. We use real evidence to shape environments that genuinely support how people work, whilst reducing unnecessary cost. Designing for different modes like focus, collaboration, and learning, whilst also optimizing across the full spectrum from hybrid to 5 days a week. And change management resolves that organization versus individual tension. We use data insights to understand how people use the workplace, then design targeted interventions that create lasting cultural change. We're currently introducing activity-based working for a large insurance client who wants to work differently. And if your company is embarking on a large build or move, we're thinking big and also working with the Digital Building Council on rethinking REBA. So this is where every REBA stage is turned into a live evidence-based checkpoint with continuous feedback loops and digital validation, and it prevents costly misalignment, maybe like HSBC. And I just wanted to include on the next slide an example of the type of occupancy dashboard that we have been working to produce with the client. So getting the right data in real time to give incredible insights on how space is being used. I'm also interested in combining data to produce metrics such as workplace experience score, which can be used across portfolios. And the next slide. But of course, if people are going back to working in the office more, and that does seem like the direction of travel, even if hybrid working remains the norm, one of the biggest impacts is on the environment and sustainability. The carbon footprint of commuting is real. On average, a remote worker's carbon footprint is 54% lower than an office worker's. And while some argue that home energy use increases with remote work, studies, including those by the International Energy Agency, show that the carbon saved by not commuting far outweighs the extra heating or cooling used at home. Waste generation is another consideration. An office typically produce more waste, including paper and single-use plastics, compared to working from home. So on the next slide, it's no wonder that the smarter, greener, best-in-class buildings that keep carbon emissions to a minimum reduce energy consumption and costs and allow their teams to report on all of these are the ones that are in the highest demand, as I discussed at the beginning. Smart buildings in particular support energy optimization with sensors and AI-powered systems such as HVAC and lighting, adjusting to real-time occupancy and environmental conditions, cutting energy usage. They also allow for better renewable integration, decreasing reliance on fossil fuels. And smart building tech supports circular economy principles by reducing operational waste and optimizing space. And more importantly, they also really support a better workplace experience through optimizing environmental conditions and providing real-time space and room availability. So next slide. So my final message is that return to office is not old news, but poorly designed return to office should be. If we're looking to create our own GOAT, the greatest of all time workplace experience, then we should be designing presence intentionally, using data to reduce friction, and balancing performance, well-being, and carbon. Next slide. So stop debating days and start designing experience. If you'd like to get in touch, I think my email is going to be in the chat as well, but you can also use this QR code to get to my LinkedIn, and I'll look forward to meeting some of you and hearing your own experiences. So I think we've got time for questions now.
Fantastic, Catherine. Thanks so much. Yeah, we have got some questions already. The questions are in the Q&A. I think I said the chat at the start. It's the Q&A. So if you have any questions, please do pop them in the QA now, and we will come to those shortly. One here from Duncan East. The last question we had is, what are your thoughts, Catherine, on presenteeism? So where staff come into the office when they're not well because they think they should. I think there's an expectation to be there. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's the worst kind of having to be in the office. I mean, presenteeism in itself, that you just have to be seen being there with no real purpose is awful. People coming in where they're not 100% well. I mean, I thought we'd got over that with COVID, but you're still seeing it sort of creeping back now where people feel that they have to be in, and it's just, there's no reason for it. It just passes on germs to everybody else. So I think presenteeism as itself is not good, but if you're ill as well, that's like double whammy.
Yeah, I agree. We've got a couple here that are from anonymous attendees. We'd like to follow up with you individually after. So if you have any questions, please do add your name as well. That would be really helpful. But these are good questions, so I'm going to read them out. This is interesting because at our workplace, we have regular sort of quite well structured team days. But the question is, what is the best approach to implement team days effectively whilst also supporting the needs of a diverse workforce?
So, I mean, the biggest thing I see about a team, I mean, they are great team days because you will see your colleagues. There's no point going in if all your colleagues are then, calling in on Teams or Zoom. That's the worst thing. So team days are great. I think what I'm seeing though is that it's not being coordinated across the business. So that is why you'll get Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays being the peak days with people not, or even, worse, one day is completely oversubscribed and the other days are less busy. So I think there needs to be somebody coordinating across the business to make sure that all works well. And obviously with, diverse needs, this stuff really depends on people's individual contracts, but I think there always needs to be an element of flexibility. But sometimes people can go too far with that and then never come in. So there's a balance between, we usually call it, there's a responsibility yourself to be in and be with your team, whether that's helping junior colleagues or, having time with your manager. That's your responsibility as a worker, and it needs to factor in as well.
Another question from an anonymous attendee. This is very, very relevant to the work that we do at Mobility Ways, thinking just about the commute now. They've asked, do you agree that one of the challenges is access to the office? During post-COVID, staff were recruited from far and wide. A 5-day spread with parking has become a 3-day peak. And in addition, does commuting not jar against the net zero commitments?
So there's a few different things there. I think there has been an issue with people being, like you say, recruited during COVID when they could be from anywhere, or even people moving out. So there was a whole thing with people moving further into the countryside. The issue, again, it's around people's contracts, I suppose. If you had that flexibility baked into your contract, then you can kind of really leverage that. If it was just coming into the office I mean, most companies are trying to do it gently so that you've gone from, 1 day up to maybe 4 days, but it's taken 2 years to get to that point. And if people really are not happy, they need to obviously talk to the business. But I think that has been an issue. Sorry, and what was the end part of that? Was
And part was the conflict then between requiring people back in the office and their associated commute, even if actually they maybe took the job because during the pandemic they were able to work remote. Maybe they took a job which was further away from them that they might have done otherwise. So I suppose, is there a conflict then with asking those people to be commuting to the office and the net zero commitments?
Yeah, I mean, when we spoke about this before, Sam, that some companies are really keen to report on all of their commitments and the energy they're using with their staff, kind of commuting in versus being at home. I mean, it's a difficult one, but for me, that's why I see smart buildings and whether those are retrofitted or new buildings being so much more desired by companies because you are keeping those carbon elements to absolute minimum in the office. So you are asking people to use more carbon coming in, but when they're actually in the office, it's a minimum amount compared to older, more inefficient buildings. So I think companies are taking it seriously as they can, but there is a tension there for real.
And crucially, also it's the manner in which they commute as well. So sustainable commuting can obviously mitigate some of those impacts for having more people back in the office.
Oh yeah, we're definitely seeing a reduction in car parking spaces, companies choosing their locations so that people can get trains, tubes, buses. So definitely a move away from cars completely. But I know it's not always possible, especially outside of cities.
Question here from Roger Sexton. One of the reasons for the continued popularity of home working is the cost of travelling to work, in particular the cost of season tickets. So season tickets into London cost several £1,000s. Contrast that to Swiss General Abonnement, which I understand is Switzerland's all-network public transport travel card. So it's an annual travel pass. So they
Mhm.
have a travel pass which is around £3,800 per annum, and the GA gives you free travel on all Swiss public transport. Sounds fantastic. Should we have something similar in Britain?
I don't get me started on trains. I think we've ruined our whole train system, and the rest of Europe laughs at us sometimes. At how expensive it is, how disjointed it is. I think we should be offering much more subsidized travel, and I completely agree. Maybe we need to start a splinter pressure group to get our travel sorted out.
Absolutely. One here from Edward Wheeler. So, what are the best in class transport facilities that you have seen in all of your time and in your experience? And what are the most popular? And that is from Ed at SLR Consulting Transport Planning.
So the best ones I've seen are there's a building in the city called 22 Bishopsgate, which was one of the smartest buildings in Europe at one point. And they have a travel zone, which is incredible. It's got space for every single type of bike. You can book it in. I mean, one of the problems in London that bikes get nicked. If you park your bike there, it's going to be absolutely safe. You can get it cleaned. You can get it. They've got people looking at them. Have you got any problems with your bike? There's amazing showers. I even went round with the head developer, and he said, go into the ladies' bathroom and just what else would you want in there if you were a woman coming in coming in on a bike? And we were like, oh, you haven't got hair straighteners, and he's like, great, we're going to get loads of hair straighteners in there. So it was really exceptional. And I think if you were even thinking about whether you could cycle in, you would definitely want to do it working in that building.
So that's an example of the workplace really thinking about how their people can be travelling sustainably, but also what are the other benefits associated with sustainable travel. And in that case, obviously, there's well-being benefits, but clearly there's health benefits too, aren't there? So
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
sounds fantastic. One here from an anonymous attendee. Our company are returning to a 5 day in the office as of April the 7th, having slipped into a hybrid working pattern, albeit informally. It feels like a backward step. Is there anything in terms of informed working patterns to protect people who now rely on flexibility for school drop-offs, etc.?
Yeah, I mean that's if it's never been a change. I mean, I'm not on the sort of legal side of contracts and whatever, but my understanding is that if your contract is 5 days a week in the office, unfortunately, they have the ability to ask you to do that. I mean, the sort of irony is that before COVID, there was a bit of flexibility with people tending to work at home on sometimes on Fridays, or if you had, a delivery of something or there was some issue you needed to be at home, you could do it. Seems like companies that are being more draconian are really going for it now. I mean, the thing about kind of drop-offs and pickups for kids, I mean, that was never something when I was starting to work. My kids were little. I just had to get care to do it. I think we've got used to being able to do it. So it's just a kind of a gradual move away, and there is a cost to that. But if the company's expecting you to come in, there are benefits to being in. I know that's not very helpful, but it's kind of how it is.
This is interesting. So, this person is based in the north slash Manchester. The session so far seems to have been focused on urban areas, and there's been some great examples from urban areas, which is great. It's really good insight. But have you got any similar or different thoughts on rural offices? The majority of colleagues living in rural, but yeah, in rural areas, but traveling to the city or having office space that is very basic, old school style.
I mean, I have worked on projects where there's been some campuses in the countryside. I did a big project with Barclays, and they have a beautiful campus in the countryside. Sort of, I suppose the nearest city is Manchester, but it's not that near. And they've introduced a very interesting way of booking car parking spaces, but also they've really upped they have vans going, minibuses going from the nearby stations to the campus to help alleviate some of those issues. And that, I mean, that is an incredible, there was one of the places where they had music and free coffee, and they were even thinking of putting a llama zoo at one point. So yeah, really upping the ante on how that would perform there. So
Mm.
it's not just cities.
We've got quite a few more questions, so I'm going to keep going with these. This is from George S. Lambrau. As an international company, we operate in countries with very different transport infrastructures. For example, not everywhere has the public transport options London does. How do you recommend balancing hybrid working policies globally, ensuring fairness, supporting productivity, and still meaningfully reducing commuting emissions in regions where low carbon travel isn't easily accessible?
I mean, kind of, I suppose this is what to me is the sort of perfect working environment where you're only coming in when it's necessary and for purpose and for the experience. And what I would love to see is a company kind of doing a meeting overhaul so that you really plan your week so that the in-person collaboration workshops, one-to-ones are focused around key days. So it could be Monday, Tuesday, it could be Thursday, Friday, whatever, 3 days, 4 days, whatever that company needs, but that it's really focused. And then you're doing the type of work that needs quiet and focus, or you're writing a report, something like that, you do that at home. So that you're really structuring your week to make the most of it, and you're not coming in when you really just need to be doing heads down work. And I think that is the Nirvana, and then you'll be cutting down on the travel as well.
So my team are all based in the same city, so we have always worked with each other virtually. The stance of sitting with each other to work effectively seems to be a moot point in our situation. I personally enjoy being in the office, but how do you encourage others in a similar situation that in office attendance is of value?
Uh, so I'm not quite understanding that. So that's reminded me of a certain type of behavior that I've seen in some offices, that we got so used to being on video calls that even if you were in the same building as somebody in a meeting, sometimes you wouldn't meet in person. You just do it on a video call, sort of as time efficiency. And I have seen sort of nudges within systems being brought in. So, by the way, like a nudge will come up. By the way, do you know that Claire in finance is in the building today? Why don't you meet in person rather than doing this on a call? And it can be sort of added into the system, because I think that's almost the worst thing, where you actually could be together and you're choosing not to because you can't be bothered to walk up 2 flights or whatever, or you just got into the habit of not doing it, more to the point.
Mm.
There was an end bit of that though.
Yeah, I think it's just that. I think I might have misread the start. So my team aren't all based in the
Oh,
same
aren't.
city.
Oh, right. Okay.
So have always worked with each other virtually. So
Yeah.
that culture's always been there of working virtually. So just I suppose the benefits aren't just as understood by people of working with each other. This
I have a
person's
client with this exact scenario at the moment. All their teams are distributed in
Mhm.
London and other countries, but they are based in Manchester. So, but they've been in a WeWork. They've actually really liked some of the social elements of being in. So we're actually moving them into a new space to do activity-based working. Um, the thing there that we're really doubling down on is the social side of things. So making more events, activating the workspace. So doing coffee mornings or social things, running clubs, like what fits their culture that we can help them start to introduce that will bring people in from the different teams. Because even if you're not working on a project together, you still benefit. You're still in the same company and you can still share information and understand what different parts of the business do. And that synergy between teams is really important for companies and something that's been really lost, I think, during lockdown and not completely recovered yet.
Okay. Roger Sexton has followed up. So public transport is much more than trains. The GA is the Swiss General Abonnements. It covers buses, trams, even boats on the lakes. So a truly
Sounds
multimodal offer there.
wonderful.
Yeah, sounds great, doesn't
We
it?
should all go and live in Switzerland.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I went there recently, and the transport system does work
Yeah.
incredibly well there. Yeah, it is a joy to travel around Switzerland. This is Michelle. Do What do you think about 4 days work week?
Oh, I've been completely fascinated by this because I think so much time is wasted. Sometimes we talked about presenteeism. That we've all been in meetings where you're like maybe not sure why you're really there. There's not been a clear agenda, or you think actually this meeting could have been an email update. It's I think there's a lot of wastage, and what happens with the 4 days week is that you really look at how you're working. I'm sure it obviously wouldn't work for everybody, but I am fascinated to see companies that have put it in and how everybody is benefiting from it. Their productivity's gone up and everybody's happier. People are off sick less. People's retention is much higher. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting one to watch, and I'm totally for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, interesting debate. This one, so rents in Dublin, so from Ireland, are out of control. So contracts, people that signed during COVID, while obviously they weren't considering the cost of commuting, presumably, might not now make the same financial sense as they did 4 years ago. Was this a consideration for any company survey or report? So I guess some of the work that you've done previously, has this ever factored?
So I haven't had well, I'm actually just in discussions with a company in Ireland, so I will get some experience of that. But I mean, I understand, rents across the UK are pretty horrendous, and people made decisions at the time which weren't factored in, and then we're seeing that as a it is a constant thing. I think, especially for young people, rent is a horrendous part of their outgoings, and probably needs to be addressed. But companies are usually quite considerate around what they're really asking, unless you've got these real kind of, hardliners like JP Morgan or, I heard Foster's and Partners architects were definitely from the beginning 5 days a week because they felt that they needed that. But those companies, for companies that aren't that same attraction, don't have that same attraction, I think they need to be more flexible, and be a bit more considerate. But changing rents is a hard one.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so it looks like those are the questions that we have now from the audience. I might just ask one more myself before we close then. So I suppose if you were advising a board in 2026, what would you say is the biggest strategic risk of getting the return to the office wrong?
So, I mean, I would say it's a double hander. I think if you've got a really good workplace culture or work culture and people are happy, push, and we're seeing this from the questions that are coming in. It's if you get that wrong and you push people too quickly, you can really destroy a really good workplace culture. That I think goes hand in hand with if you don't really understand what you're trying to do and you haven't really looked at the data, you can end up spending a lot of money getting it wrong. I've seen companies at the moment where they are spending an awful lot of money enlarging their footprint. And actually, just from the anecdotal stuff I'm getting, I know that if they, sorry, if they did a bit of analysis, they'd be able to just work in a slightly different way and make it all work. So I think spending a lot of money, and we're talking millions here on getting it wrong. So destroying your culture and wasting a lot of money.
Presumably, not to leave on a negative note, the opposite would be true then of getting it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And when companies do get it right, people really respond if they feel that they've been listened to about how they work, the way that they want to work within the building, and those spaces align to what they want to do. I think it can be almost magical how it works nicely together.
Thank you so much, Catherine. We have one more slide just to pop up on the screen to advertise our follow-up webinar. So if we could just cut to that final slide, I'll just let people know when the webinar is happening. So this is a Mobility Way showcase, product tour and client success stories. This is on Thursday, 26th of March, 2026 from 11 until 12. And that is with our sector director, Mark Hands, and Millie Botting, who is a member of our consultant commutologist team here at Mobility Way. So please do sign up to that. The link will be in the chat now. I think that'd be great to have you there. But finally, thank you so much again to Catherine. I thought that was a fantastic webinar. The recording will be circulated to all of our audience. Please do follow up with Catherine. She shared her email address and we'll send that round again for you to follow up directly. Thanks so much.
Thanks, I enjoyed that.
Cheers. Me too.